So let's talk about how to load your A series exercises using standard sets. Okay, so standard sets are these rep schemes where, like 3 by 10, 4 by 8, 5 by 6, etc., etc. Okay, so for example, 5 by 6. So we have set 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So you have two ways you can load standard sets. You have constant loading or step loading. So constant loading, this is the type of loading you're going to use like in the earlier days with your new clients, somebody you don't really know. You don't know what's their work capacity, how they recover, what's their fiber makeup. So constant loading allows you to kind of like read your client a little bit better. But as soon as you feel comfortable with your client, then you should move on to step loading. So constant loading, this is the approach where your 5 by 6, you use on set 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, you use, let's say, 100 kilo, like you establish that 100 kilo will be the weight that he's going to be able to do 6 reps with, but you want to be on the conservative side, and then he does 6 reps. Okay, he does them. Now, irrespective of how you think that the client did doing the 6 reps, did he struggle or not, you're like, no, I'm sticking to 100, and then you look at what he does. 100, look at what he does. 100, he did 6, and then 100, then he did 5, let's say. So then you're like, okay, it's pretty good. So because he basically almost did his rep, session number 2, you would go up to maybe 102.5, and then you play the same game and you see how he's doing it. But now on the flip side, let's say that the client, he did his 6 on set 1, he has poor work capacity, only did 4, then let's say he only did 3, then you know that for the time being, the load of 100 is too much for this client. So next session you readjust and you might start at 95, let's say. Okay, and then you work on making sure you reach the point where he's doing 6 reps on the 5 sets. But this is constant loading, like I said, typically like you might spend like 12 weeks on that, and then it's time to move on to step loading. Now, step loading, so this will be the type of loading you will use for the rest of your training lifetime using standard sets. So what's important to understand is you take your rep, okay, which is the rep dictates the intensity. So for example, based on a 1RM continuum, 6 reps represents 83% of your 1RM. So let's say that 83% of 1RM is 100 kilo. Okay, so that's your client's 6RM, it's 100 kilos. Now what you want to do is you want to use a range of 10% from that 100 to base your increases in load throughout your 5 sets. So 10% of 100, 10, 100 minus 10, 90. So set 1 would start at 90, and then you build slow increments to finally peak on your last set with your actual 6RM. So what happens here is you're building quality work, but using that 10% range, it's not so wide that the first few sets becomes irrelevant. So now all of your sets are high enough in intensity to create the response that you plan for, but not so much that you have like garbage mileage, okay? Like if you take the classic deadlift progression of 225 to 275 to 315 to 365 to 405, now that range is so wide that the first 3 sets were basically useless, okay? So that's why like it's important to have a narrower progression of load using your step loading approach, okay? So now you've done this, on session 1. Okay, so you've built quality work. It was a hard workout. You've reached your max on your last set. And what's good about this is now you've reached your rep goal of 30. Okay, so 83% was the intensity you planned, but the volume target was 30. So doing so, you've reached 30, which is great because volume is also an important element of progress with your training. But on the flip side, if you would have started set 1 with 100, now that first set would have been so hard that you would have had a drop off in reps from set to set. So for example, like me, if I were to use my 6RM right off the bat on set number 1, my reps might have looked something like this. Like 2, let's say, okay? So now we have like 19 reps instead of 30, okay? So I'm pretty far from my rep volume. So although I train hard, it made my training much less effective in the long run in terms of what I plan to achieve, okay? But if you followed this and then you done this and then you did 6 reps on every set, what you do is session number 2, you start set 1 where you started set 2. And then if you succeeded doing 6 reps, workout number 3, you start on the second set. So now what happened is at the end of my 3-week mesocycle, I've had an increase in load of 5%, okay? It might not seem like a lot, but if you add on these 5% over the course of a year, it can lead to a very dramatic increase. And the thing is, not once did you kill yourself with that A series where the technique was not optimum, like forced reps, put yourself more at risk of injury, train so hard that your recovery curve is too long, and then you have a decrease in performance, and or you crash and you reach overtraining and on and on. Okay, like by myself in my early 20s, I used to train like that, like super heavy RM, like right off the bat, and I would never reach my rep volume target. I would get tired very easily. It would lead to strains and stuff like that, and I wasn't really progressing to the rate that I thought I should have until I learned to pace myself with that A series and use that step loading approach with that 10% range. Now, as you move down the training program with your B and C series, because now you've done your quality work, because you're doing like slightly simpler exercise at this point for less sets, maybe only 3 or 4 sets, now it's okay to train to failure and really, really push yourself, because at that point with that B and C series, you're looking more for a hypertrophy response. So the quality work and the more neural aspect, it's already been done, okay? So just make sure that you pace yourself with that A series to improve technical proficiency, but also to make sure that you keep progressing over time with your periodized plan, okay? So this is how you would load your standard sets using step loading.